Place to go. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow. It doesn't show signs of stopping, and I brought some corn for popping. Good evening. I'm Karen Sullivan, publisher of Orenda Books, and tonight it is my very great pleasure to bring to you a dark and chilling Christmas story, narrated by Team Orenda authors from 13 nations. If I Whisper My Christmas Wish has been written by a brand new crime writing trio of Michael J. Malone, Louise Beech, and Matt Wesolowski. And bringing it alive tonight to you are David F. Ross, Will Carver, Helen FitzGerald, Simone Buchel, Eva Bjorg Eggesdotter, Doug Johnston, Vanda Symon, Michael Stanley, Agnes Ravatin, Thomas Enger, Antti Tuomainen, Lilia Sigurdardottir, Jorn Horst, Paul Hardisty, West Camel, Johana Gustawsson, Rod Reynolds, Eve Smith, and roxannebouchard. And of course, the authors of this brilliantly creepy original story themselves, Michael J. Malone, Matt Wesolowski, and Louise Beech. Settle down now, draw the curtains, hold your breath, and listen. If I Whisper My Christmas Wish. 10 years ago, Malcolm Brambling told his form class about his favorite Christmas memory, not caring that their eyes almost immediately glazed over, that Sophie Tucker was looking at her phone in her handbag, which really shouldn't have been on her desk, and Stephen Whitburn was in danger of losing his finger while mining in his right nostril.
Malcolm would tell 11E about being a small boy, up on floor 5 of Denham's department store at Christmas. It was a full and rich memory. The twinkling lights, the rows of toys that went on forever, the whir of the electric train that rushed around the track suspended from the ceiling, the crowds of kids that undulated around the NES consoles to play Duck Hunt or Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. After trekking round endless shoe shops while the wind and the snow whirled outside, this was the ultimate reward. These days, Malcolm's memories appeared of their own accord, shifting ghosts that lurched into his consciousness without prior warning, screaming their sights and sounds at him before melting away, like his breath in the air. Not all of them were the idyllic childhood wonder of Denham's toy department either. Hairy fell of New York. Malcolm turned at this, some old part of him appreciating the wordplay, before he realized it was directed at him. But they were gone. Teenagers, like the ones from 11E a decade ago. Long-legged lads in tracksuit bottoms, kicking their laughter all the way down Glenwell Street. Cleverer than they knew. Hairy fail. Not bad at all.
More spindly-legged teenagers were flocking towards the yellow light of McDonald's, like insects, and Malcolm thought he'd best get moving. He trudged further down Glenelg Street, the wind's cruel fingernails working their way under his clothes. The entrance to the old Sports Direct was already taken, sleeping bags trussed up beside each other like mummies in a nest of newspapers and cardboard. The rest of the old shops had grates pulled down, the empty interiors hidden by rippled metal. When he reached Denman's, or what was once Denman's on the corner where Glenelg Street petered out, another less welcome memory came tiptoeing into his head. The beard, fake this time, that irritated face and the musty stink of the red jacket and the too tight boots. The 5th floor, which was filled with plastic tat, little kids with their wedge haircuts and cynical eyes, fat mums staring at their phones. His childhood wonder trodden all over by discount trainers.
The pale corridors and beige staff room that smelled of sweat and dead dreams. The bottle of Glentrule he kept in his locker, and the name that would never leave him, Abby Fenwick. Her little voice crawled over him in the darkness, woke him from sleep. Drink was the only thing that blocked her out. Your breath smells funny, Santa. The last thing Abby Fenwick had ever said to anyone before she disappeared from the face of the earth. Malcolm rested his head against the glass of what was, a long time ago, Denman's department store, and stared at the empty display. The cobwebs, the severed legs of a mannequin, still sat in a chair, thick with dust.
No rippled grate protected the doorway, and yet no one ever slept in the once ornate fir tree green and gaudy gold, but now boarded up entry to this forlorn store. Perhaps it was because the building had been empty for years, so lacked the lingering, even if only imagined, warmth of the buy one, get one free discount stores that still open daily for business. Perhaps no one slept here because of the stories, because of the scandal that shut the store, because of the ghosts. But the wind goes right through you. It's no place for the old.
Was that song now lodged in Malcolm's head? No, the lyrics drifted like cheap perfume from an office night out group who clattered past shrieking Christmas Eve. Malcolm's fingers were blue and the cold was getting worse. He usually found a spot behind Weatherspoons where discarded cardboard boxes could be fashioned into something akin to the bed his father built him out of wood and painted elf green 1,000,000 years ago. But tonight, something kept Malcolm here. Something whispered, "Sleep with me, beside me, keep an old friend company." And he listened. He settled in the porch, back against the double doors that had, once upon a time, opened with an old-fashioned tinkle, warm air wafting out. He was grateful that the vegan roll someone had given him earlier sat in his belly, but wished a bottle of Glentrule was his bedmate. He tucked himself into a ball and closed his eyes. Malcolm must have dozed, despite the bone-numbing chill. A dream, a memory, in which he was back on floor 5 of Denham's once again.
The ceiling train tracks swirling above his head like a godly path to a heavenly station. Rows and rows of wide-eyed baby dolls ready to drink and wet on command. But he wasn't a small boy. He was hairy Fail, and gravelly and drunk. He was Santa, coke blood red, fatness real, jolliness fake. If I whisper my wish, will it come true, Santa? Abby Fenwick. Malcolm woke with a jolt. He could still see her, the hair that needed washing, but that someone had made an attempt to style. The dress, cheap, just too tight beneath the arms. The eyes, oh, those wretched, sad eyes. He rubbed his own. Gone. He was alone. But what was that, snaking beneath the doors, unfurling like a Christmas cracker joke in a warm hand? A train track. I could have been someone. Or so could anyone. Shut up. Who's there? Who? Surely, the pubs were shut now. Malcolm listened hard. The streets were silent. The lights had died. Frost hardened the softest edges. He stood, the train track curled around his newspaper-filled trainers. When he opened the doors to Denman's, not even locked, how odd. A bell tinkled as he stepped inside. He followed the track as it weaved through the shadows, past more severed mannequin limbs and rows of empty, rusting racks. It stopped abruptly at brassy doors, a lift. Malcolm pressed a silver button and the doors pinged open like they'd been awaiting him since his childhood died. When he looked down, he realized he was holding a toy train.
He looked at the toy in his hand, only becoming aware of its weight in increments. It looked like it had come from a different period, a time when toys were built to last. This was the engine compartment. It was about 5 inches long and made of some sort of metal. Tin or brass? The body had been painted with red lead paint and the large funnel was black. It's from 1895, a voice sounded with certainty in his head. The owner had been a little boy, the voice told him, Harold Clark. Then he became aware of how cold the train was. It was almost sticking to his hand as it grew colder and colder. A white fur of frost growing over the red paint until the train was painful in his palm.
Despite this, he stood there, his hand providing a cradle for the train, as if he feared that dropping it would mean letting Harold down. After all, the voice said, This was just how Harold was found, aged 10, lying under a holly bush in the grounds of the poorhouse, frost-whitened like a marble carving of a raggedy clothed barefoot cherub. The pain became too much, and with a pained scream of defiance, Malcolm dropped the train and watched as it fell to the carpet and scattered into a cloud of snow. What on earth was going on? Malcolm looked around, eyes darting here and there, as if the answer hung in the air. This was all in his imagination, surely. He needed a few good meals and a week of sleep. That must be it. Even when he was neck deep in the bottle, he had never experienced anything like this. The doors to the lift started to close, and in a panic, Malcolm thrust his right hand out. The brass hit his hand, and with a ping, the doors slipped open again.
He stepped inside, and his heart jumped when he felt the wall structure rock, as if it was about to plummet down into the basement. But the mechanism was solid, and the floor settled. Hand over his heart with relief, he turned to face the doors in time to see them close. The light overhead went out, sparked back on, and then music stuttered into the space, as if it were being cranked out with a handle. Oh, the weather outside is frightful. This was no polished production, however. The instrumental was off-key, and the vocals sounded as if they issued from a suffering throat and diseased lungs. But the fire is so delightful. It didn't sound like it was coming from any speakers in the lift. It was more remote than that. And since we've got no place to go, he looked down at his feet, at the plush, blood-red carpet. It was coming from down there, he realized with a chill. Way down there, an echo from a different time, beyond the veil, as if it was being piped up directly from purgatory. Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
And then the rush came, the vegan roll in Malcolm's stomach leaping up almost to the back of his throat. There was a terrible crack from somewhere above him, and in his mind's eye, a terrible vision of a broken black cable swinging in an empty space where the lift carriage had been. It was falling, lost to the mercy of gravity, which was sucking it downward. Malcolm grasped at the wall to steady himself, but it was just smooth metal. He collapsed into the corner instead, down and down and down. Maybe he was screaming, maybe not, curled into himself with that song, wailing out in spiteful delight. When the carriage stopped falling, Malcolm didn't feel it. The walls didn't crumple around him, carving his body into a mass of cartilage and broken bone. His throat simply gave out, and in the silence where his screams had been, there was stillness. Malcolm took a long, shaky breath, but did not dare open his eyes. Instead, he begged the sadistic conjurer that was his own brain to give him a break, just this once, for Christmas, to let him wake from this terrifying miasma of past, present, and future. He would stop the drink. He would sort himself out. He would this time. He could almost hear the echo of one of his year 11s talking about metaphor, about symbolism, and all of that bollocks. Please, begged Malcolm to his mind, please. Let all of this just be some terrible dream, some metaphor, a lesson. His terror, let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
As if in answer, a soft ping sounded. Malcolm kept his eyes closed. He heard the lift doors creaking open and felt a gust of warm air, like breath. He was a kid again, hand in mom's hand, excitement in his belly, standing at the front door of Denman's. He was 27, standing in front of 11E, asking them to write ghost stories. You ever heard of Harold Clark, sir? He was 47 years old, sitting in the toy department, sweating through a Santa suit and a fake beard, knowing if he stood up, he'd fall. Not knowing if he'd even be able to stand up.
A little girl on his knee. What's your wish, little girl? I wish the little boy finds his lost toy for Christmas. Her eyes shining, the bruises on her face, her hair lank. Can you help him, Santa? Bile in his throat. The little boy? Yes, Santa, the little white boy. Whiskey churning in his belly. I don't see a little boy. He lives here, Santa. He lives in the shop. Where? The little boy, there. He's lost his train. And he's crying, Santa, please. I don't want to go with him. Santa, please. The screams, the deafening screams that burst his brain, that echoed around the toy department like a siren. Being escorted off the premises by a security guard. I'm so sorry, Mr. Bramblin. So sorry, sir. I'm just doing my job. A face from the past. Acne gone, not a lanky teenage boy, but a man now, pushing him gently into the streets. The name gone from his memory like the steam of his breath. If there's anything I can do, sir. Stumbling away, the pain of humiliation worse than the bite of the pavement when he fell. Once, twice. Muttering to himself on the bus, staggering home in the dark. Now Malcolm staggered to his feet again, on legs older, weaker, paler. Not the ghost legs that had taken him back into the classroom, into Santa's grotto, and the past, the wretched past, but trembling legs on which he now stood before open lift doors, the echoes of the festive melody fading. He stepped out. It wasn't possible.
No. How? The lift had dropped. He was sure of it. Dropped. And yet, here he was, standing on the 5th floor, and the train was still in his hand. He turned to go back into the lift, but the brass doors had closed, and no matter how hard he pounded the silver buttons, they remained shut. Sick with unnamed dread, Malcolm faced the floor of the department store, the murky Dolan clown graveyard that was once his favourite playground. Then the lights flickered into life, and with them came music, too slow, as if coming from a broken gramophone. It was like someone had called action, and the film had begun. It was not going to be a gentle moral tale. Oh, you have it. What? Who said that? Malcolm spun about, bowels watery. No one. You have Harold's train. The track on the ceiling woke. Clickety-clack, 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 as though trains were moving, yet none travelled there.
Who's there? Whispered Malcolm, fearing the answer. You know me. She came from behind a stack of cobweb silk nighty Barbie dolls. Her bare feet made a wet smacking sound on the grimly floor. The lank hair was now spattered with blood, crispy, scattered through strands like maroon jewels. Her eyes clacked as she blinked. Or did Malcolm imagine that? Hello, Santa, she said. It was Abby Fenwick. Harold wants its train.
No, yes, Malcolm tried desperately to release it, but it was welded to his palm. Why don't you sit on my lap this time and let me hear your wishes, she said, her voice coming from a deeper place than any child's should. No, I want to go. I'm with Harold now, Santa, she said. We all are. All? Who all? What do you mean? Even as she asked, Malcolm didn't want to know. He only comes for the lost, she hissed, taking another step closer. What do you mean? The words were a gulp.
The lost. The kids who are broken already. The abused, the neglected, the abandoned. He promises us everything we want. They found Harold's body under the holly bush by the poorhouse, but that wasn't him. They never found my body in that boggy marsh where no one goes. And if they had, it wasn't me. Sleep with me, beside me, keep an old friend company. Who said that? Hadn't Malcolm heard those words when he first arrived here? Harold wants his train, but I've lost something much more precious. Abby was now so close to Malcolm that she could have bitten his nose, and I want it back. A memory slid in, barbed with self-loathing. He had watched from his stiff-backed Santa throne as Abby got separated from her mother in the crowd of shoppers. He had raised a hand and prepared to shout the alarm, but then a little boy shut off his view, standing eyeball to eyeball with him, demanding his attention. "Oi, Santa!" Then he looked back to see if his mother was watching, and he whispered, "Please make it a selection box." He had a petted lip the size of a pillow and a grand set of bright, even teeth that suggested his parents rarely offered him any sweet treats.
If only he'd ignored that kid, gone and found the little girl, taken her to the offices and called out on the tannoy for her mother. If only. Were there ever two such burdensome words in the English language? The weight he'd carried with him all these years. The girl would still be alive if he had followed his instincts. "It's not really your fault," Abby whispered, the chill of her mouth almost touching his skin. He felt the words like a kiss of absolution. But then she added, "Not really." Little specks of saliva flecking the curvature of his ear. But he started to defend himself, knowing it lacked conviction. After all, he'd blamed himself for this every day of his life since, allowed his contrition to drag him down into the ditch, and worse.
"Anyway," Abby interrupted, "I want it back because an adult touched it. Harold's getting his train back. I want mine too." "Your what?" Another memory. Abby in front of him, a smile of apology when she'd read his shamed response at her comment about his breath. One hand was out for whatever gift he was about to give her. The other correcting the hand of a little handbag positioned over her right shoulder. It was about the size of a paperback, made of clear plastic, and had a gold link strap. With a jolt, he remembered that he'd heard nothing about this bag when the newspaper reported her body being found. And he'd pored over every article he could find, searching for something that would tell him, "It's not your fault." Not really. Abby smiled and faded from view. "Wait, is there something in the bag you want? How on earth am I..." The lift, plunging. Was there a reason for that? Everything else he'd experienced this night had come laden with meaning.
The basement. He wasn't going back into that lift, so he made his way to the back stairway. A ghostly green fog lit the stairwell, amplifying every step he took on the bare concrete. Down here were the staff changing rooms with toilets, a galley kitchen. The kitchen looked like it had jolted to a stop, frozen on the end of a harsh breath. 3 mugs were lined up by the kettle. One had a tea bag in, the others held instant coffee. Someone had been standing here, he thought, ready for a cuppa, unsuspecting that they were about to be ordered to drop everything and leave. He walked to the male changing room. Most of the lockers were empty and open, the space within each wreathed in shadow. He stuck his hand inside one, felt a chill and pulled away, as if he was afraid he'd be hauled in and lost to another time. Then Malcolm found himself walking around the room, hand out, trailing his fingers through the cold that sulked from every locker. He came to the one that had been his. With a start, he saw that it was empty, apart from a Santa hat. They must have pilfered the rest of his costume and not given this locker to anyone after he left.
He then realized there had been one locker he'd felt nothing from as he'd passed, a void. He stepped back and felt his hand and held his hand up to its locked door. Strange, he thought. All the other locker doors were open. Whoever had owned this one must have been on his day off when the order came to drop everything and leave. A breath caught in his throat. Connolly, the security guard, this was his. He could practically see him in front of him, asking him to move so he could put his jacket and his lunchbox away. He remembered the man's apology that last day. Just doing my job. And from this vantage point, he looked back in time and read the concern in Connolly's eyes. It had been as cold and fake as a Rolex bought down the pub. The guard had pushed his mouth into a smile that had faltered, as if he had followed instructions from an online video and forgotten the last important step, to make sure your smile lit an ember of light in the dark of your eyes.
He gave the narrow metallic door a push. Nothing. It was locked fast. He tried to stick his fingers into the frame and pull, but he couldn't get enough purchase. The maintenance guys had a room just outside, he remembered. Maybe there would be a tool, something he could use to prise this open. Moments later, he was standing in front of the locker with a crowbar in his hand. A quick, satisfying tug and the door was off its hinges. It clattered to the floor, the sound ringing out against the thin linoleum like a celebration. This locker looked different from the others, not so deep somehow. How could that be? He stepped back to check the other lockers around him. Yes, they all had much more depth. He went back to Connolly's locker, stuck his hand inside, and gave the back a little push, a click. Then the back of the locker opened up, like another door, pulse charging in his neck. He forced a calming breath and widened his eyes to have a look. "Dear God," he said out loud, his voice echoing in the space around him like a prayer in a portent. A deflated football, a small digital watch, an album of football stickers.
A little gold bracelet with tiny charms, a palm-sized pink plastic pony, and lots of other lost children's lost toys. No, the voice said, trophies. And there, right at the back, a plastic see-through handbag with a gold chain strap. Reverentially, Malcolm pulled it out by the metal and tried to make sure as little of his DNA made its way onto the object as possible. He looked in through the window of the plastic to see what was inside. A slim paperback of Enid Blyton tales, a pink hair bauble and a 3-pack of nail varnish. One glittered and the others were different shades of party pink. Abby had been on her way to a party after visiting Santa. Emotion played up from a tightness in his chest to a lump in his throat and ended with a solitary tear gliding down the grime on his cheek. Abby and her parents and all the other children deserved to have the harsh end of their lives noted and the culprit brought to book. He felt a certainty that had been absent for most of his life. He knew just what he had to do.
A long hour's trudge through the cold, past a long scatter of Christmas lights, found him in front of a building he knew only too well, the police station. Inside, chest out, chin up, he marched over to the reception desk. The duty officer was a pleasant but firm woman he'd met on more than one occasion when they'd given him a cell for the night to get him out of the cold. He watched as she ran her eyes over him, no doubt taking in his grey Brillo pad of a beard, a head of hair that hadn't seen water in many months, and his ragtag collection of clothes. But when she met his eyes, she reared back a little, as if surprised at the clarity and purpose in them. It happened a long time ago, he began, and as he spoke, he placed his old Santa hat on the counter, allowing Abby's bag to tumble out. As it appeared under the scouring factory-like light of the reception area, he felt a sense of peace wash over him, like silent, heavy snowfall. He felt the years fall from his shoulders and the sin of a Christmas past spool around his feet like a puddle of slush. As I said, it happened a long time ago. A little girl called Abby Fenwick. She was likely the first. He cited the precise day when Abby had vanished, his voice as clear and sonorous as a church bell in crisp winter air. He ignored a peal of delighted, girlish laughter that sounded in his mind, and announced, "There's been a murder."
And so that draws us to the end of this wonderful story, which will be free to download from our website from tonight. But for now, from all of Team Orenda, we wish you
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Christmas.
Merry,
Merry
Christmas,
Christmas.
from Hamburg. I'd so love to see you.
From Helsinki.
From Denmark.
Oh.
From Quebec.
Australia.
From New Zealand.
We wish you the happiest of holidays, however you celebrate, and a sparkling 2021 from Team Orenda.